Hey there. I am glad to be back here on a Wednesday, and thanks for being here for those of you who are joining me today. And I am going to focus on this unique feature of the new Cubase score editor that kind of came to, it surfaced in my mind when I was doing my last live stream the other day about the score editor in Cubase 14 as well. And it's this feature of display quantize. It's a very important thing to understand, and I think for Dorico users, it's actually fairly natural. If you're somewhat experienced with Dorico, then you're familiar with the fact that notes can play back differently than they actually look in the score. So a note might look like a quarter note, but that does not mean that the MIDI event, starts right on the grid and fills up an entire quarter note. The playback can be a little different from the written note. And we use that in Dorico kind of from the score to the output. We use that to manipulate some humanization. In Cubase, it's going the other way around, whereas we're often capturing a performance. So we're starting with the humanized version, and we're trying to render a score that is readable and legible. So Cubase's Display Quantize at its heart is a feature that's all about preserving the performance while making the score legible. So it's a really important concept, and it can kind of drive people crazy. I think was in my experience, one of the challenges with the old score editor was that you would get a lot of sort of nonsense in there. And if your MIDI notes were not right on the grid, your MIDI notes would get all over the place. Now, in defense of that, because I know there are some people out there who did like the old score editor, the old score editor had display quantize features as well. So I don't know if it's just that it works better. Maybe it just works better for the styles that I write. I can't really say. But what I do know is that understanding this concept about what display quantize is and then how you can work with it is really important. And that's going to be what I cover today. So I'm going to address a few different things. First of all, there's track display quantize, which is going to apply to everything in the track. And then there's event level display quantize, where you can actually go in and you can change a specific note. And I actually have an example here that I'll show you sort of a discrepancy where something really should be a quarter note, but Cubase is calling it an eighth note, and I can just tweak that even though the rest of the track is fine. So track level versus event level display quantize is really important. And I see a few more people on here. Thanks for joining me today, Peter. And the idea behind manipulating those two is also a very different experience, because track level is in kind of a dialogue window. I'll show you where that is. And event level is actually a tool in the editor, in the score editor. I'll show you where that is as well. So the other thing that I think is important to understand how to do is to filter out key switches, because although I do a lot of channel switching, and those who've watched a lot of my videos are probably familiar with that, key switching is still the standard. The vast majority of people are key switching between articulations, especially in orchestral instruments and things like that. And you don't want those in your score. You don't want some sort of like C minus one, like 1,000 ledger lines below your bass clef. You don't need that. And I want to show you how you can filter those out, okay? The other thing is I'm going to show you how you can look at both your key editor and your score editor. There are some slight differences in how you might manipulate notes in the two of them, and sometimes one might suit you better than the other. I personally really like to see both the score editor and the key editor, and I'm going to show you how I do that. And then the last thing I'm going to kind of point out today is that when you record stuff in Cubase is actually quite intelligent about determining that what you're playing is a triplet or that it's legato, and it's putting that sort of stuff in there. Of course, in the case of triplet, it's rhythmic, so that will actually play back appropriately. However, although it will add in slurs for legato, it does not actually have any capability of going and grabbing a legato patch, for example. It doesn't do any like channel switching like that. So, okay, let's dive in. I'm going to start off here and get myself centered here. So what I've got on the left is a standard Cubase window. On the right, I've got my score editor. And in the lower zone, I've got the key editor. So let's start off a little bit with track versus event level display quantize and understand a bit more about what's going on there. So when you select MIDI up here in the project, you're probably familiar with the fact that whatever happens in the lower zone here is going to kind of sync with that. And if you want to view the score editor instead, then down here you just want to go ahead and hit score editor. You can change that in the settings, I believe here. You can say that the default MIDI editor, you could change that to score editor if you wanted. And you can also ask it to always open up in the lower zone or to open in a full window. I like to open in the full window, and that's actually kind of a trick for me about how I get to see the key editor and the score editor at the same time. So open commands, I just want to make sure I didn't change that. Okay, so when I select a different instrument up here, I get that instrument. If I select both of them, then I get them both in the editor here. And I'm going to play this back for you, and what you're going to notice is that this little eighth note here at the end really just should be a quarter note. Okay, now I've also got an articulation change, although this is not marked as staccato. I could go ahead and mark it as staccato. I might go ahead and take that staccato off. Sometimes it determines that a note should be staccato when I don't want it to be. Now you could go in if you want to change the level here, you could, the note value, you could just change that using these tool options, but you can also use this DEQ button. And there's a couple of things about this to know. First of all, that only when you select auto do you have some control over both regular notes and tuplets. Also, when you select this, you can't unselect it, and that's because it's a tool. So once this is illuminated, you can't unilluminate it or turn it off. But you'll see now that down here, I've got a little DQ that's below my mouse, and if I go ahead and click on that, I'm going to get a quarter note. And that's because that's what is set here in the Display Quantize settings. Now I can't just turn the DQ off. It's actually a tool, so I have to select another tool. Right, so now I've selected another tool. That gets turned off. So that's a little tricky because you'd expect maybe that to be up here with other tools. Oops, not sure what happened there. I guess I must have hit a key on my keyboard. So that's track versus event level. Actually, I didn't really point out the track level. So let's take a look at that. If we're actually in the score editor, and I go ahead and I open the score editor over here, then when I go into settings here, at this point I can go into instrument. So this is just applying in this case the piano. And you can see down here that there's Display Quantize. So this is your track level Display Quantize. Using the DQ tool is your event level. So there's two different levels at which, and I can see that what's happening there is that I guess that's why I'm still not 100% comfortable with everything. So sorry about those distracting little sounds. So let's talk about filtering key switches, because I do have key switches here on this violin part. You can see them down here. And the way that that's basically filtered out, again, is in the score editor. So if you go ahead and open the score editor. Now this settings here is the layout settings. You can just click that button if you want to get it. You can also go up to the score menu and select it right here, layout settings. And that menu item may be grayed out if you don't actually have the score editor window open. So it's not really available when you're using the lower zone, unfortunately. But when you're here in the instrument panel, or instrument tab, I suppose we could call it, then there's this filter pitches below. So let's say that I took the filter pitches on I need that to really be on the violin. So I'm going to select the violin, go to the score editor. These are not changes that you typically have to make frequently. But down here, if I were to say, okay, filter pitch is below, and I were to change that to C-1, now you can see over here I've got my most horrendous display of notes because it's now displaying the key switches. So if you have some key switches that are showing, you can always use the filter pitches above and filter pitches below here, and it's on an instrument level, right? So you can make sure that you're on the right instrument, and then you can change that along with Display Quantize. All right, the final sort of tip, I guess, is to show you how you can see both the score editor and the key editor. I like it where if I don't have the lower zone open and I double click on a MIDI part, I like to see the key editor. I often like to see my lanes down here. I'll have CC lanes for expression and modulation and that sort of thing. So I like the key editor a lot. When I go into Cubase settings and you go to editors, and you go over here, double click opens the editor in the lower zone, and I want it to open the key editor. If I change this to score editor, it'll open the score editor in the lower zone, but that's not what I like. I like to see the regular score editor in its own window. Now let me just show you that if I were to go and change that to lower zone, that's the default setting. This is what happens, and what I don't like is if I go up here to the score menu and I select open score editor, it replaced the key editor with the score editor, so I kind of can't have both. So what I tend to do is I go to my Cubase settings and I change this open editor commands, which means menu commands, open editors in a new window. And I leave default MIDI editor on key editor, and that it'll open in the lower zone. And that way I can have it in both. So when I select this, I'm going to get the key editor at the bottom, but if I go up to score and open the score editor, then I get the score editor in its own window because that's the way I've configured my settings. The last thing that I wanted to just mention was that this set of triplets here was actually determined along with these legato slur lines by Cubase, so it does a really good job. It created this staccato notice or staccato articulation display on that note. That's something that it sort of does automatically, and that's also something you can change in the settings. But I don't want to get sidetracked on a million and one features. So I'm just going to take a look here and see if there are any remaining questions. So yeah, nice. Perfect, yeah. So I guess you just upgraded, Peter, from 13 to 14. There's definitely a lot of features in there that I think are really great. 14, I think the score editor is huge for Dorico users, but there's at least 3 or 4 other things that I really like in there. So I would, I'd be interested to know if questions come up for you as well. Just let me know, and I can do some videos on it. But yeah, hopefully this helps you guys feel a bit more confident working with the score editor. If there's any questions, please post in the comments. If you're watching this video after the fact, please do like and subscribe. Helps my channel grow, helps me reach out to a larger audience. And I will be, hopefully, I will not be here this Friday because, well, actually, maybe I will be. That's going to have to, we'll have to see. That's tentative. I'm not sure if I'll be in town this Friday. But hopefully I will be. I'll be back on Monday for sure. If not, I'll probably have a video on Friday that posts. So thank you so much for supporting my channel. I appreciate everybody being with me here today. And I see well, one last comment from Daniel. Is there a way you can arrange the score in key editors as in Dorico? Yeah, one of the things that I think is kind of different between Dorico and this is what comes to mind. I'm not sure if it's exactly what you're asking about, but score order. When you import something from Dorico, for example, into Cubase, it does not really retain the score order currently, or sometimes that is inconsistent. But you can certainly arrange the tracks. It's just a matter of dragging and dropping the tracks in the project window. Whatever order they're in the project window is the order that they will be in your score. I'm going to do some videos down the road on layouts because I think that some of that might be oriented around layouts as well, but I would recommend in the meantime look into layouts if you're trying to get to the bottom of some of those arrangements and display conditions. Other than that, thank you so much everybody, and I will see you again.